the risks of suicide and the things that we can do to intervene, to care, to be there. So it used to be that traditionally you'd look to the crisis intervention people for concerns about suicide risk, suicide gestures. It has changed because we've learned that, you know, this agency over here and this hospital over here and the police department here, and those of us that work, you know, at hospitals, working in a disjointed manner. Excuse me, I'm going to grab my water. Working, you know, in little clusters doesn't make a difference. Unity, collaboration, coordination with one another, there's great power in that. And I have just been so honored to work this year, excuse me, with the prevention leads from F.E. Warren Air Force Base, with the prevention leads from the Army National Guard and the Air National Guard, two wonderful prevention leads at the Air National Guard. Wonderful talent and tremendous commitment. The theme that military chose this year, Connect and Protect, and the VA emphasized be there, are one and the same. Being there is being present, care, ask the question, extend a warm, kind remark or gesture. It's powerful. So being aware, showing compassion, listening without judgment, listening to validate whatever an individual that's struggling has to share with you. Caring gestures. There was a nice clip that the VA Suicide Prevention nationally put out this year, and it just was a clip of humans being humans. An individual in a coffee shop seeing somebody looking downhearted and alone, and buying them a donut or bringing them a cup of coffee or another beverage. Standing in line at a fast food restaurant, and you see somebody kind of dejected, looking maybe a little disheveled, pay it forward, buy them the meal. There's so many ways that we can, in small ways and large ways, extend human caring to reinforce that an individual that's struggling is worthwhile, that they have purpose, that there is hope and there is help. So the major shift to the public health approach in suicide prevention is networking and partnering with other people in the community, coordinating our efforts. And I am pleased to say at the VA, you know, only 1/3 of veterans get services at the VA. There's 2/3 out there that are alienated for whatever reason, maybe a bad experience, or the services didn't seem to suit them at a given time. We want to support our veterans getting help where they're open to getting help. We've had wonderful experiences with our chaplains, and I know that there's military chaplains as well, but our VA chaplains are very passionate about suicide prevention, rural outreach, education, and also just being there to answer a call about for somebody that's in distress. Another shift has been that we're hiring more and more peer support specialists at the VA, and they are former active duty military people that are concerned about their brothers and sisters that may be suffering after their military experience and their adjustment back to civilian life. So uniting, coordinating, collaborating is powerful, good stuff. I wanted to share a few words from one of the psychologists that works nationally at the VA. She expressed a perspective about veterans and suicide risk and prevention that was very warm and matter-of-fact and reducing the stigma. And I'm paraphrasing her, so I am going to be referring to her words, but it's not verbatim. That's right. Empower veterans, this is our goal, empower veterans and end the national tragedy of suicide. Suicide is one of the most challenging societal issues of our time, and it affects veterans at alarming rates. I have seen intense suffering and emotional resilience. I've seen the joy of personal growth, the power of effective clinical care. I've witnessed the magic when communities collaborate, combine resources, and coordinate their efforts. Now, while the debt that we owe to our veterans can never fully be repaid, we must empower men and women to lead healthy, productive, meaningful lives after they take off the uniform. Our goal is to ensure that veterans find purpose and discover belonging within civilian communities. And that is a very challenging process at times. For those struggling with emotional pain and hopelessness, we must provide hope and effective caring. That's what the Be There, Connect to Protect campaign is all about. We must strengthen connections and coordinate our services within our communities. We need to plan to prioritize areas that will make the biggest impact in the lives of veterans now, while continuing to build a foundation for the national collaborative efforts, because they're evolving over time. Strengthening the connection, coordinating services in our communities to ensure veterans receive the opportunities and support that they deserve. Now, there's 5 areas we're doing this, and I'm not going to expound on it because our previous speakers have done a marvelous job of talking about services, resources, and things we can do as individuals to help one another. First thing is culture change. Reduce the stigma. Communicate, educate, train. Rihanna Brand referred to QPR training. And what was the other one? Assist training, thank you. Very empowering and enlightening. Access to care. We have to do a better job of linking people in distress to care. And like I said, 1/3 of veterans are receiving these services at the VA. And there's multiple support services that we can offer. But our community has other wonderful services and resources. But we, as just individuals, we want to be more alert. We want to be more observant so that we can identify people that are suffering. Because it's those people without intervention or relief that are at the greatest risk for thinking about suicide, planning suicide, and we want to prevent the intent to die by suicide. We've already talked about the robust community engagement and how important the partnerships are. There's research ongoing. Now that sounds cold and impersonal. Statistics, numbers, oh yeah, you VA people are all just about checking the boxes and counting. I understand it appears that way, but information is power. And as we collect data about those who have either attempted to die by suicide or who we have tragically lost by suicide, with that data we can develop a greater understanding of where our services are lacking and where we need to put our energy and resources. So we want to change the conversation and people's understanding about suicide. I wanted to do an object lesson, and it's a messy object lesson, but I think that visuals sometimes powerfully communicate things, as Rihanna did with her hula hoop. I couldn't have done that, Rihanna, I'm impressed. But I can pour things into bottles. So, excuse me as I remove this. Now, whoa, all of us have an emotional tank where we store the feelings about our everyday experiences. This container represents a veteran's emotional tank. And our previous speakers have touched on some of the risk factors for suicide. Not just for veterans, some of these apply to all of us. The truth is, all of us have a saturation point, a point at which we cannot take any more. Some of the stories by our survivors have illustrated that very well. And so I'll be redundant in some areas, but this emphasis is very important. We talked about physical pain. Physical pain can come from injuries, as were discussed by Tim Shepard this morning, and the suffering from chronic, unrelenting pain. You don't know when it's going to end. It can lead, that alone can lead a person to end it all. Do I have to continue to always live like this? I cannot cope with that thought. I would rather die than to suffer from pain every day. So pain is added to the emotional tank. Moral injury. Moral injury is more common, I believe, in military and in the lives of veterans due to engaging in witnessing the death of a battle buddy, taking the life of somebody in the conflict, the marital and family problems that can happen during deployment. There's a lot of shame, there's guilt, and that's what moral injury is. For those of us who have had substance or alcohol problems and have hurt others and hurt a loved one or a family member, there's moral injury there. There's some guilt and shame about that. But the bad choices that we make or the negative experiences we have in life don't define who we are. And we want to talk about and express our feelings about trauma and difficult experiences we've gone through. That's very difficult in many cases for veterans. So we're going to add guilt, shame, moral injury to our emotional tank. There's been conversation about alcohol and substance abuse. Sometimes it's a habit, sometimes it's an addiction. It affects every aspect of life: physical, mental, relationship, employment, finances. So we're going to add that to our emotional tank. Mental health diagnosis. PTSD being one of the most predominant, it is distinctly a risk factor. Rihanna talked about complex PTSD. I've worked with many fine men and women that are experiencing the disruption and just the overwhelming symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder, because as she pointed out, it's a brain biology connection that is really woven tightly together, and it can vary the quality of life and our productivity in life. Now, there's depression, there's other anxiety disorders, there's other stressors, day-to-day stressors, there's death, there's divorce, there's children with problems. So we're going to add trauma, particularly post-traumatic stress disorder secondary to military service, into our emotional tank. Finances are a big one, thus the green. Financial strain is a significant risk factor for suicide. Sometimes we're in a situation where it just seems like it's hopeless and it will never end. It affects our capacity to eat well. It can affect our ability to sustain ourselves with a roof over the head. It's a very pervasive stressor. Many of us have experienced that in our day-to-day lives. But you take a veteran who's already experiencing some of these other things, and you throw in the economic stress that adds and fills up the emotional tank some more. I'm going to add this mental health container that refers to chronic anxiety, sadness, depression, any adjustment disorder. Takes up space in our emotional tank. Today, and this year's theme, though, strongly emphasizes the importance of social connection. On the contrary, social isolation that may happen in old age, when spouses pass on, or one finds himself alone. Social isolation may be intentional. A person's nervous system is so overwhelmed, the thought of interacting with others is just too anxiety-provoking and uncomfortable to contemplate. That is a significant risk factor. As you can see, we're running low in space in our emotional tank. So much so that family conflict, marital relationship conflict, there's no room for that. Anger, rage, agitation. This has been spoken about today. Rage can happen just because this tank is too full. Rage can happen in response to depression, anxiety, just being overloaded with psychosocial stress, the day-to-day events of life. So while I'm being cautious because our emotional tank is pretty darn full, it's when this tank is full and we're not getting the support and help that we need, that the risk of suicidal thoughts, thinking more and more about means to end one's life, and getting closer to that dangerous and tragic juncture. We want to prevent it. But every one of us can only contain so much. This is a precautionary move. The emotional tank is very heavy as well. So what happens if we don't get relief? What happens if we don't get the kind of help that we need in our unique individual circumstance? Now, you note on here, I put COVID. All of us have our own stress. But then the pandemic came along. Interestingly, the pandemic has contributed to financial woes. It has caused disruption in employment. It has increased conflict in families and in marriages. People are dying. People are grieving. People are fearful. So that and other events and unrest in our country can lead to that point. Getting to that overwhelmed point, overloaded point, is not our fault. Just gonna throw in a little rage here. But if we don't get that support, if we don't get the services and the assistance that we need, any one of us are vulnerable to reach the point of overload. And when that occurs, we spill over. Another way I refer to it is our junk closet busts open. Every one of us can only contain so much in our emotional tank before it gets dangerous and high risk. I often say in my trainings, every one of us is vulnerable for life to get in our face. When life is in our face, as represented by my hands in my face, we lose our perspective. We don't see the hope. We don't see the help. We don't see the purpose. And we're vulnerable to spill over. We're all passionately invested in suicide prevention, but we invite everyone to learn, reach out, be there, care, be aware, connect, because it's a powerful factor of protection in managing suicide prevention. It's not a simple solution. It's going to require our persistent efforts. But I do believe that there is hope. And I appreciate all those others that participated in getting this message out today. Be there. Extend care. Thank you.
Cheyenne Suicide Prevention Coordinator, thank you. We will now take a brief 5-minute break for technical setup for the next speaker. This is a reminder of the National Suicide Hotline, 1-800-273-TALK, and the Wyoming Army National Guard Suicide Hotline, 307-369-3011. You are not alone. We need you. Thank you.
Hey, can you hear me? Hey, can you guys hear me yet? Martin, and I'm the program manager at the Wyoming Department of Health for the Injury and Violence Prevention Program. And one of our main focus areas is suicide prevention. And so today I just wanted to take a look at the data with you guys and talk a little bit about what we're doing at the state level. So first, I'm going to take a look at the big picture and then talk a little bit about some of the challenges that we face in suicide prevention. Then take a look at some of the Wyoming data, how we're using that data, what is on the horizon as far as data collection is concerned with the Wyoming Violent Death Reporting System, and then resources. So first off, typically when you're talking about suicide prevention, this is the number that you're going to see over and over again. And this number is the number of deaths by suicide in the United States in 2018. So it's a big number, but it doesn't show the full picture of the impact of suicide on the United States. So if you've ever done any work in public health, you've probably seen this analogy a million times, so bear with me. But in the US in 2018, the total suicides were 48,344, and suicide was the 10th leading cause of death. But we know that that is just the tip of the iceberg. Really, just like an iceberg, one of the main things you have to worry about is all the stuff underneath that you kind of can't see, all the stuff below the water. So we also know that in addition to those 48,344 deaths, that approximately 5% to 25% additional suicides took place and were not captured. And I'll get into that a little bit more when I talk about challenges. We also know that suicidal behavior is 40 to 100 times greater than the number of deaths by suicide. And we had 1.4 million documented attempts in the US in 2018. Those are only attempts that were documented. So where somebody sought help at a hospital potentially, and then that visit was coded in the system as a suicide attempt. So there are a lot that aren't being captured. We also know that the people affected by deaths and attempts is a very large number. In recent studies, they've determined that 125 people on average are impacted for every suicide. And I know that that number to some may seem kind of large, but if you think about it, we've got older adults that die by suicide. You know, maybe they're in their 80s, they're socially isolated, they don't have a lot of family left. So that death may impact significantly less than 125. But on the other side, you also have, you know, the death of a high school student by suicide. And that is going to have a much larger impact in terms of numbers of people affected on a community. So the average is around 125 per death. And then that's not even taking into account all of, you know, if you have a public figure that dies by suicide, you know, that death can impact thousands of people. So if we take that number, 125, and look at just the number of deaths that we know of, not even taking into consideration the unreported suicides, then that is an impact of some varying degree to 6 million people in the US. Then if we take just the number of documented attempts, that's an impact of an additional 175 million. So you can see that Suicide touches so many more people than just that 48,344. We're just looking at deaths and attempts that have been actually, captured in the official count, and we're already at over 180 million people being impacted to some degree. We also know that in 2018, 16,156,356 people reported thoughts of suicide. So next, I want to show you guys this map of suicide mortality by state. And the lightest color, yellow, which you can see here, Illinois, California, New York, New Jersey. These states have the lowest suicide rate in the country. We've got Texas, this color, Georgia, North Carolina, Virginia. These states have the next highest rate. And then we've got Florida, South Carolina, Louisiana, then that's the next one up. And then Arizona, Nevada, the Dakotas, the next one up. This darkest red color, which includes these states right here and Alaska, have the highest suicide rate in the country. And this is often referred to as the suicide belt. There are a lot of theories as to why the suicide rate is so much higher in this area. There isn't one definitive answer yet. A lot of people are trying to study this and figure out what the issue is so that we can attack it. But right now, some of the theories are elevation. You'll notice this area follows the Rockies. Some people say that these are more isolated states, more rural states where people, we know social isolation has a big impact on increased suicidality. So there are a lot of theories out there, but we are unfortunately in this suicide belt, in this region with the highest rate. The US suicide rate in 2018 was 14.8 per 100,000 individuals. And the rate of suicide was highest in middle-aged white men. In 2018, men died by suicide 3.56 times more often than women. And on average, there were 132 suicides per day. White males accounted for 69.67% of all deaths by suicide in 2018. And in 2018, firearms accounted for 50.57% of all suicide deaths. And I did not mention, but that is another one of the theories, that these states also have the highest firearm ownership rate per capita. So I think it's like most things, it's probably a little bit of each of these factors that come into play as to why this region has such a high suicide rate. So next, I want to talk to you guys about some of the challenges that we face. So in the iceberg slide, I referred to the fact that some of these deaths we do not know. Not everything is reported. Not everything is captured. And some of the challenges with that are, at the local level, we have 23 different counties in our state. Each of those counties has a different coroner. Some of the coroners have medical backgrounds, some don't. It's an elected position. And this is very common throughout the country. to have the position of coroner be an elected position, and it doesn't require having a medical background. We also know that in smaller communities, we hear that, there is a lot of stigma around suicide, and oftentimes not with any malintent. Coroners will offer to rule a death as accidental, versus as a suicide to spare the family any shame. This is not just anecdotal. I've heard this from the parents of teens that have died by suicide here in Wyoming, and some agree to this, and then some get really upset by it and end up calling me to talk about it because they realize immediately the need to have accurate reporting on the number of suicides so that we can actually prevent these from happening in the future. So in addition to that challenge of getting the correct data captured, there's so much stigma around mental health and suicide. And that plays in even our language talking about suicide. There's been a big shift to, instead of saying commit suicide, say die by suicide, because you commit a crime, you commit a bad act, but suicide has been decriminalized in all 50 states. And the only thing that it serves to do is cause more shame to the family, the survivors of a suicide, and changing that language around suicide and how we talk about it is an attempt to destigmatize suicide. We also have our cowboy up culture here. We look at a lot of, as I was talking about, the national rates, and this is reflected in our Wyoming rates as well. A lot of the suicides are middle-aged white males, and they're often looked at as breadwinners and have to be strong. And we have a history in our country of viewing mental health as something very different from physical health, even though now we know that that is not true. And some people view it as a character flaw or something that they can just get over. And that is another harmful stigma around mental health, because you would never say to somebody with, COVID-19, for example, buck up, get over it. You would obviously recognize that, if you're sick, you can't help it. And you would want them to seek treatment. And the same is true for mental health. There are also a lot of myths around suicide. Things like talking about it will just make it worse. Or if you talk about it, that'll plant that idea in that person's head, and then they will act on that. We conducted multiple studies, and those have been proven to be false. It's not true. It's healthier to normalize it by talking about it, and destigmatizing it. And some of the other issues that we have are things like even just the media coverage of violence in general. If you turn on the television and watch many of the shows that are out there, there are whole networks that are dedicated to shows that talk about homicide. But the reality is, in every single state in the US, the suicide rate is higher than the homicide rate. And it's just another way of kind of keeping suicide hush hush and behind closed doors. It's just another reason that we need to break that stigma down. So As far as Wyoming is concerned, in Wyoming, we have the second highest rate in the US. Our rate per 100,000 is 25.4. That's compared to the national rate of 14.8. So you can see it's quite a bit higher than the national rate, and these numbers are from 2018. I can tell you that all the way back to 1989, which is as far back as our data goes, we've been in the top 10 highest rates in the country in Wyoming. So hopefully you guys can see this and it's not too small, but in 2008 to 2018, ranking by age per 100,000, our highest rate in Wyoming with the rate of 40.53, which is well more than double the national average, is in the age group of 80 to 84-year-olds. The second highest rate is almost tied with the second and the third, being right around 36 per 100,000, and that's 40 to 44-year-olds and 85 and up. And then after that, 45 to 49, 35 to 39. So we're still talking about the middle-aged population, but also secondary to that is the older adult population, especially 80 and up. Also in Wyoming, I've got this graph which is showing you the means or mechanism as well as gender from 2008 to 2018. So overall, firearms accounted for 65.4% of all suicides. And for males, firearms were used in just under 70% of all deaths by suicide, while conversely, it was only 48% for females. Suffocation, which also includes hanging, that is higher in females, only slightly, but still higher in females and lower in males. Poisoning or overdose is highest in female and lowest in males as means. So the next thing I wanted to talk about is how we're going to use the data that we have right now to inform prevention efforts. So again, another very common public health model is the upstream or the river analogy. So if we're up here before we get to the dam, I want you to think about that as contributaries to suicide. So there's no thought of suicide, but this is where we have things like stress, job loss, depression, substance abuse, all of these different things that can contribute, not always, but sometimes can contribute to thoughts of suicide. And then once we get here to the dam, this is where we're thinking more of, we're having those thoughts of suicide, we're contemplating it. As we get a little bit further down, this is where we're starting to display suicidal behavior. So maybe coming up with a plan, acquiring access to lethal means, self-harm. And then down at the bottom of the river is where we have an attempt or suicide. So at the bottom is death. So working in prevention, our goal is to try to help people and prevent them from even thinking about suicide, or once they've thought about it, to try and bring them back up here before they go to the dam. So in prevention, we're trying to reduce things that contribute to suicide. So we call this upstream prevention. So we're trying to reduce those things like the stressors of job loss or depression or the end of a marriage or all the different things, substance abuse that could lead to somebody thinking about suicide. And then with intervention, we're trying to increase the safety of persons with thoughts of suicide. So in this area, we're thinking more about, access to lethal means, gun locks, things of that nature. Having trained people in your communities that are able to spot those warning signs and be able to provide help to that person who is already thinking of suicide, because they're able to notice that and able to refer them to services where they can get the help they need. And then postvention, this is help for people who have injured themselves or are affected. And it's just that continuum of care that after that happens, that they don't end up going back down this river again, that we keep them on this other side. We do know that one of the greatest risk factors for suicide is a previous attempt. All right. So how are we using all of this information in the communities around Wyoming? So a little over 2 years ago, the Wyoming legislature basically assigned the Wyoming Department of Health, or challenged us to put funding towards these priority areas of suicide prevention, underage drinking and other drugs, tobacco, and adult binge drinking. This money that we're spending towards all of this, which adds up to $8 for the is funded through different tobacco settlement funds. All of this funding is pushed out to 23 counties, but we only have 22 that produce. Commissioners, and every county looks a little bit different. Some use public health nursing to push this money out into the communities. But the idea is that the community prevention specialist works with coalitions. They develop work plans using the data from their specific county. And we encourage them to work on policy efforts. So whether that be with different employers in their county to create comprehensive pre- and post-vention plans. Crisis response teams, working with law enforcement, crisis intervention trainings, training the general public, and supporting zero suicide framework in hospitals or medical care facilities in their area. And so that's how we're pushing money out to 22 of the 23 counties. And currently there are 23, this is just a coincidence, 23 evidence-based strategies being initiated. So on average, around 5 per county. So each county has different challenges. Each county has different capacity to address suicide prevention. So we give them the data, we work with them. Strategies are going to be a best fit for that county versus us just having a blanket approach for the entire state, because we recognize that what works here in Laramie County may not work in Lincoln County. And let's see. Next, I just want to briefly talk to you about the National Violent Death Reporting System. Almost 2 years ago, Wyoming Department Reporting System. I believe there were 10 states that were left to be funded, and we were one of those last states to join. The National Violent Death Reporting System collects detailed information from law enforcement reports, death certificates, coroner reports, including toxicology. And at this point in time, all 50 states and Puerto Rico and Washington, D.C. are all a part of this. And this is all run through CDC. So since January of 2018, we have been abstracting data for every death, every violent death in the state of Wyoming. So that includes suicide, homicide, and deaths of undetermined intent. And we collect data and put this into the database. We abstract all of these reports, law enforcement, coroner's reports, and put them into a database. We're looking at things like location of injury, characteristics of a victim, relationship of the victim to a suspect, weapons use, toxicology reports, alcohol, substance abuse, relationship issues, problems with a job or finance, all of these different issues. And this is really going to help us in Wyoming. Next year, we'll be able to put out our first state report. We have an advisory board, and at the end, I'll show you my contact info. Please contact me if you're interested in serving on the advisory board. We'd love to have you. But this is going to give us much more meaningful data to inform our prevention efforts at the state level. It's one thing to know that, okay, the majority of deaths are by middle-aged men, middle-aged white men by firearms. If we know that it's tied to problems with jobs or finances, then we can work closer with those employers who are shutting down a business, whether it be a mine or whatever, so that we can get out in front of this and work on that upstream prevention that I was talking about a minute ago. As far as resources in our state, we have, I think, a pretty great website where you can go on our website. You can search for the type of resource that you want in your community. You have contact information for every community prevention specialist in every county. We have community mental health centers in every county, and we have several nonprofits around the state doing work in suicide prevention. Of course, I have to mention the fact that until last month, until earlier last month, we were the only state in the country without an in-state suicide prevention call center. And now we have 2 in Wyoming, one in Grable, and they're answering calls from Wyoming to the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline. And that means they can actually refer them now to local resources and cut down on that wait time. And here is my contact information. I only went 2 minutes over. I apologize. Please feel free to reach out to me via email. Go to our website, check out our resources. Call me, email me if you need anything, if you have any questions, if you're interested in getting more information, I would be happy to help.
Thank you very much, Miss Lindsay Martin from the Wyoming Department of Health Injury and Violence Prevention Program. Thank you. Next, ladies and gentlemen, Miss Captain Leslie Brazil from the Wyoming Army National Guard. Resiliency and self-care and self-awareness. Miss Brazil, take it away.
Okay, good morning, everybody. My name is Captain Leslie Brazil. I am a member of the Wyoming Army National Guard. However, I'm coming to you today in a civilian capacity because not only am I in the National Guard, but I'm also a licensed clinical social worker, currently working in mental health with kids and adolescents. So just a little bit about me. I am, like I said, a member of the Wyoming Army National Guard. I commissioned as an Currently, I'm a field artillery officer post-command. However, I am transitioning to behavioral health to be a part of the medical detachment here in Wyoming. Additionally, I serve as a SHARP victim advocate and have been in that role since 2017. As stated before, I am a licensed clinical social worker. I specialize in suicide prevention, intervention, and postvention efforts with kids, adolescents, and their families. Previously, I was the suicide intervention counselor at Youth Alternatives, and currently I work as a school social worker at Johnson Junior High. I'm also QPR and Assist certified. I also serve as the vice chair for Grace for Two Brothers on the board of directors, and I am a PhD candidate studying marriage and family therapy. So today I'm going to talk to you about 3 things that are really key to the idea of suicide prevention, intervention, and postvention. These things are resilience, self-awareness, and self-care. Now, I'm going to be talking in kind of broad terms, and I want us all to really dig deep and learn about these 3 things within ourselves, how it helps us recognize and understand not just risk factors, but protective factors, but then also what it means for those that we serve. So, as I said, I'm standing before you as not only a military officer, but also a civilian provider. And I'm on both sides of the spectrum, as I think a lot of the people in this audience are. So it wouldn't be a military briefing if I didn't list our objectives here. Please take your time to read those. But basically, we're just going to be understanding, again, the risk factors and protective factors of these three things. Again, this is a sensitive subject, as are all of these topics that we've been talking about today. I encourage you, if at any time that you're triggered throughout this presentation, to please seek help, reach out to somebody that can support you. You can always reach out to me as well. I will provide my contact. So we're going to begin by discussing the idea of resilience. Of course, I found these definitions from everybody's favorite, Dr. Google. So resilience, according to Webster's dictionary, means the capacity to recover quickly from difficulties or having toughness. So again, coming from a military background, we've all been through master resiliency training. It's almost everybody's least favorite mandatory briefing. However, it's by far one of the most important, because when we're standing up and we're leading soldiers or we're leading in the community, knowing the resilience within ourselves and the resilience within others is a vastly important piece to being that preventative measure. So just a little bit of research thrown in there. Leo Schur is a leading researcher on suicide prevention out of Scandinavia, and he states on the importance of resilience in education and prevention that building resilience should be a part of universal, selective, and indicated suicide prevention interventions. Promoting resilience may reduce suicide risk in the general population, in groups that are at elevated risk, and among high-risk individuals. Building resilience within the general population may reduce the incidence of stress-related disorders and, consequently, suicidal behavior. So he's not exactly saying that there's a direct connection between stress and suicide, but he is alluding to a correlation. Another group of researchers, and they look at resilience in more of a business management perspective, is that there are 4 elements to the idea of resilience. And those are confidence, social support, adaptability, and purposefulness. And so when we really reflect inward to ourselves, and maybe you put yourself in a position like, say today, standing up here on this stage, having the confidence, knowing that maybe I fail, maybe I succeed, but having that at the end of the day equals a resilient piece in my mind. Social supports. As a mental health professional, one of the first questions that I always ask my clients are, who do you have for support? And that's not just a one-time question, that's an every-time question. When things are good, who do you turn to? When things are bad, who do you turn to? So who do we all turn to? Who are our supports? Who are our soldiers' supports? What if they don't have the family? How are we fostering that with the people that we lead and the people that we serve and within ourselves? Third is adaptability. A lot of these go without saying, but we all face hardships, we all face struggles, especially right now, 2020, I think we can all agree that this has been a year of chaos. And with every day, we're faced with new unknowns. And we adapt every single day. But if we lack that piece of adaptability, it takes that stress and that chaos, and it compounds until it becomes oftentimes unbearable. And then finally, purposefulness. I know as a military leader, as a strengths-based leader, we always try and find what it is in the people that we support or the people that we lead that makes them who they are, and giving them that purpose and giving them that sense of satisfaction, and we should celebrate that in them. And I think anybody in this room or on this screen who knows and understands the effects of lack of purpose and what that causes for people who are maybe feeling hopeless in their lives. So having these 4 elements and taking them into consideration within ourselves and within others, we're constantly promoting the idea of resilience. It's a lot more than hunt the good stuff or learn about your iceberg if we're talking in MRT terms, but this is what makes us who we are as human beings day in and day out. I want to really harp on the fact that resilience does not mean that you don't ask for help. By being a resilient person, you don't stand in front of a room and let all of it come on top of you and put on that happy face and think that, oh, I'm okay, I'll just fall apart when I get home. Being able to ask for help is another element of resilience that I believe kind of falls into all 4 of those elements. Being able to accept help means even more, because that's just building on those strengths that we already have. None of us can do everything, and we definitely can't do it alone. So I would invite you to ask yourself the question, how resilient are you? And how does your resilience move and be communicated to those that you help and those that you turn to for support? Second is self-awareness. This is one of my all-time favorite words and topics and things to talk about. As a social worker, I think self-awareness, especially as a clinician, is probably one of the most important factors that I could have as a professional, not only in the work that I do with other people, but the work that I do on myself and knowing kind of my limits. And we'll get into that a little bit later, but again, definition for today that we'll be operating under for self-awareness is the conscious knowledge of one's own character, feelings, motives, and desires. And again, I'm going to note feelings are in there. A lot of people who know me, especially in the guard side, always kind of laugh because I try and get people to talk about their feelings, because we don't walk around stoic all day long. That's not who we are. We have emotions and we have feelings, and knowing and understanding and discussing those become a very important piece of self-awareness. Kind of in the idea of self-awareness, again, breaking this down in two different ways, both as a risk factor, lack of self-awareness being a risk factor, or high self-awareness as a protective factor, but also what that means as the front line of support for the people that may be turning to us for help. And I want to hit on three key things, and those are biases, differing experiences, and trauma histories. I know as a military officer, as a military audience, a lot of times we dwindle the soldier essence or the airman essence into their performance. But when we're looking at these three things, performance is nowhere in there. And that's something that we just look at as a standard or a measurement to gauge success as a soldier. But nowhere in performance are we talking about success as a human. And so when we, as self-aware leaders, can identify the biases that we might have, maybe it's failing a PT test, that's a bias that you have against a soldier. Automatically they fail. Maybe they're not going to be getting the support and the attention from their leaders that they deserve. So being aware of that and trying to dig underneath of what those soldiers might be going through, because performance can mean a multitude of things. It could just be a lot more than you didn't work out before your PT test. Differing experience is one of my favorite things to talk about and discuss. In a postmodern perspective, if we're talking theoretically in terms of what mental health provides or social services, human services, the idea of differing experiences essentially means that my experience does not equal her experience or his experience. And a lot of times, especially as busy adults that value productivity above all, we think that we can go through the same experience with someone and we see it the same way. But that's not true. I could have a twin sister right here that we go through the same traumatic childhood event, and her level of resilience or her level of awareness is vastly different than mine. But from the outside, you think, well, why can't she handle that? Or why can't you handle that? And so really understanding that those differing experiences make people who they are, that it affects your performance, that it affects your ability to cope, that it affects your resilience, to tie it all back to the beginning, is what we as leaders need to be aware of. And at the same time, we as people who have these experiences and understanding their effects on our own risk factors or protective factors. And then finally, it goes without saying, trauma histories. It's kind of something that I believe now kind of we're becoming a lot more aware of as a society. There's a lot of trauma-focused programs, trauma-informed schools, trauma-informed classrooms. We need trauma-informed leadership. And it's there, but it's at the individual level. And what we want is for it to be an organization that is trauma-informed, because nobody is without trauma. It all comes back to helping build those resilient skills and self-awareness. Again, I wouldn't be me if I wasn't talking about feelings. Self-awareness and emotional expression. There's nothing wrong with saying you're having a bad day. There's nothing wrong with saying that you need help. There's nothing wrong with reaching out for help. Where it becomes wrong is if that person that you're reaching out to turns away, because maybe they aren't in touch with their own feelings or their own emotions. And maybe if someone's crying, they're like, whoa, hold on, I don't do tears. What impact does that have on the person that really needs you at that time? And then finally, self-awareness also means knowing when to walk away. And I hammer this because, as I stated before, as a society that values nothing but productivity and exhaustion as a measure of success, nobody knows when to walk away. Nobody knows when to turn their phones off, or they think maybe they leave work on time, that they're not working as hard as the person next to them. But when you think about the long-term effects, what does that do to you? And what is that modeling to the people below you? If you're saying, hey, take a break, hey, turn your phone off, hey, leave early, but you're not doing that yourself, then it's a little bit hypocritical. And we're going to talk about self-care here in a minute, and I bring it all together because I do see, especially in kind of the combined worlds, that we focus so much on the work that we're doing helping other people or trying to help other people that we're actually not helping them at all, because we're not helping ourselves. And we're not taking care of ourselves. And we're not modeling what it means to be a good, healthy, well-balanced person. A lot more than in the physical sense, but in the emotional and the spiritual and psychological sense as well. And finally, everybody's favorite topic. It wouldn't be any sort of conference or symposium if we didn't discuss self-care. But the definition we'll be using today is engaging in activities that promote emotional, physical, and psychological well-being. I want to point out that self-care is a lot more than face masks and massages and pedicures and manicures. That's what our world wants us to think, right? Especially women. How much are we marketed the idea of self-care? But when you think about these two that are up here on the screen, statements that are really often said, I say that to clients all the time: you can't pour from an empty cup and put your helping others. And when you really think about what those two statements mean, we're not helping anybody if we have nothing to give. And when we're talking about self-care, I'm not talking about those physical things that make us feel good in the moment, going shopping, drinking a beer at the end of the day, having a good meal, whatever. I'm talking about boundaries, setting boundaries, learning to say no. I'm talking about recognizing toxicity in your life, whether it's relationships, a job, something that doesn't bring you happiness or doesn't bring you joy, or worse, makes you feel bad about yourself. Work-life balance goes without saying. And prioritization. I don't think there's many things in this world that we can do that are so detrimental to our jobs that can't be put off until the next day. When you have fresh eyes, a fresh soul, very rarely is something such an emergency that you have to be putting in 20-hour work days or 80-hour work weeks. I understand there are some professions that do that, but is it healthy? And is it working for the people that are receiving that product, or the consumer, or the patient, or whatever? Making that prioritization, making your health and your well-being and your emotional state a priority is self-care. And self-care is not selfish. I used to feel bad leaving work early to go home and do nothing. You think, okay, if I'm leaving work early, I better have an appointment or homework or something to do. It's okay to leave work early and go home and do nothing. It's okay to take a deep breath and maybe just sit in silence. Because if we are pouring from an empty cup, especially in the world of suicide prevention, we are helping nobody. We are hurting them. And at the end of the day, if we are somebody's only source of success, we are also their only source of failure. And so by blending all of these three things together, it all comes down to recognizing that within ourselves and how we can use our own awareness and our resilience and our ability to set boundaries to model that to other people and to encourage them to use their vast resources that have been expressed throughout today's symposium. So to kind of wrap up, I just want to kind of end with this statement, because as a military officer, and I stand in front of you now as a military officer, that this is a problem. The fact that soldiers don't want to come to people because they're afraid of what might happen is a problem. And when we talk about ending the stigma, I heard another presenter talk about ending the stigma earlier today. It's a lot more than just saying, oh, I support you. We have to live that we are ending the stigma of mental health and suicide awareness and making it something normal, something that we want to talk about and something that we want to help people through, because we cannot fight wars or battles and win them if we don't have a healthy force to do so. So I end with questions. I will put my contact information up on the screen. If there are any questions that anybody has, please reach out to me. Again, I like this picture because I think we all kind of live that every single day. if you're ready to talk, you better be ready to listen. And that's my last message for you. Again, resources that I know have been talked about earlier today, and then here's all of my information. I believe we can probably get that out somehow.
Thank you, Ms. Captain Leslie Brazil of the Wyoming Army National Guard. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, Miss Candy Sneed from Grace for Two Brothers, Cheyenne, Wyoming. Candy, take it away.
I've been a volunteer with Grace for Two Brothers for 4 years now, and I am now in my first year on the staff with Grace for Two Brothers, so that's exciting. I'm also a mom to 4 fantastic kiddos. Yep, I said 4. 3 are grown and on their own, and I still have one little munchkin at home. I'm also the youth pastor for St. Mark's Episcopal Church here in Cheyenne, Wyoming. So why is that all important? Because all of those hats blend together into one. I have also served in the military. I was in the 101st Airborne Division out of Fort Lee, Virginia. So as a civilian and prior military, I understand how hard it can be to say, hey, I need some help, right? It's incredibly stressful to do that, but it's okay to also do that. So I, like other people around this area, found my way to Grace for Two Brothers because I was searching for something. I needed healing in my life and I didn't know where to get it. I was stuck in a rut of guilt and shame and confusion, not knowing what to do after losing loved ones of my own. Some of these loved ones were family, some of these loved ones I served with, and I didn't know how to handle that. I was just searching for a ray of sunshine somewhere out in that darkness of guilt and shame. And what I found is I was not the only person in that situation. I found other people in that situation also. And through that, it began a healing process. And I was able to take that hurt, that pain, that guilt, that shame, and turn it into something positive. So with that, Grace for Two Brothers is an amazing foundation. It was created by BJ Ayers. And with our foundation, we provide resources and information and assistance to those who are in crisis and also those who are currently in crisis, and provide support to the caregivers and the survivors of suicide loss. So we're catching people at the beginning of their journey with their self-doubts. We're also helping that family towards the end when they really just can't see through that darkness. So some more stats for you. I know it's a military function, so of course there's going to be more stats. So when we talk about suicide, that's a hard topic to even get into. It's a hard word for some people to even say. It's like back in the 60s and the 70s, nobody said the word cancer. Shh, don't say it. It's a big secret, right? And people treat suicide the same way. Shh, don't say it. Don't let people know. And we're here to break that and shatter that silence that people are suffering in. The most important thing that I can give you on this slide is that Wyoming ranks second in the country for suicide by death, or death by suicide, excuse me. In the time that I'll be talking to you, this brief time that I'll be talking to you today, we would have lost somebody in the United States to suicide. On average, we lose somebody every 12 minutes. I want that to sink in for a second. Every 12 minutes, we lose somebody's father, mother, uncle, sister, cousin, coworker, soldier, friend, neighbor, child. We're going to lose somebody. So that's why organizations like ours are here to help with that stigma and help end that trend. So with Grace for Two Brothers, we can offer several things to our community, besides just resources and a friendly hug and a smile to let you know that you're not alone. We offer QPR training, which is similar to the ACE training that you're acquainted with, ASSIST training, but more importantly, we have our Hour of Grace support group, our lived experience peer support group, and our crisis calls for prevention and postvention. The important thing about that is we try to help people, again, before their attempts, to help them through that process. But in the event that that does happen, because we can't save everybody, we can try, but we just can't. And that's where we all come in, and that's where training is so important. Because I'm not going to run into the same people that you're going to, and you're not going to run into the same people that I do. But if we're all have an idea, we all have this training with us, we all might be able to reach that person in need. And that's why it's so important. So with that postvention, we have a team lovingly called the Loss Team, who actually will go out and be with a family within 72 hours after a loss. And we do that in partnership with the Laramie County Coroner's Office. So there is always somebody there with you. So you don't have to go through that path in the darkness like our family had to. It was a horrible feeling that we now can help other people through. And a lot of what we do at Grace for Two Brothers is peer support. I lived through this experience. This is what I wish I would have had. Let me help you through this also. So QPR, similar to your ACE training, is question, persuade, refer. It's the #1 training that we do most frequently at Grace for Two Brothers. We will go to high schools, we will go to businesses, we will get a group of friends together just to do this training if necessary. Recognizing the signs of suicide is very important, and I know we've touched on that topic today, but we're going to go over it one more time. Depression doesn't equal suicide, but depression can equal suicide. Not everybody that's depressed will be suicidal, and not everybody that's suicidal will show depression. But understanding the signs and warning signs and the symptoms of what's going on is crucial to helping that person get the help that they need. So with QPR, we will recognize the warning signs and learn how to ask a question. Think about that. Have you ever had to ask a loved one or a friend, are you thinking of ending your life by suicide? That's a really hard question to ask. It's even harder if you're connected with that person. So through these trainings, we help guide you in learning how to ask those questions, how to get them to the help that they need. So what does that mean for our community? Well, if we specifically talk about our youth, we have tons of resources here that is available on this slide, but also will be made available to you and on our website as well, which we will give you that information towards the end. Our youth are at risk, and if our youth are at risk and they make it through their teenage years, do you think they'll be stable adults? Probably not. The traumas that they suffer as youth will carry through to their adulthood. And that's when it becomes more dangerous, because you're just piling more on, right? And what happens if you just keep piling it on? It's going to compress. Eventually they're going to explode, and they're going to do something dangerous. People are not wired to hurt themselves. Have you ever seen that toddler stomp up and say, if you don't give me what I want, I'm going to hold my breath and I'm just going to pass out. I'm going to hold my breath till I die. Give me what I want. You know what, honey? You go ahead and hold your breath, because your body is going to pass out, you're going to fall to the floor, and you're going to start breathing again, because our bodies are not wired to harm ourselves. But every once in a while, something happens to those brain chemicals up there, right? When our brain doesn't develop properly, sometimes those chemicals don't fire like they're supposed to. And that allows us to harm ourselves. So we want to start to recognize that with our youth, because during the PNA survey, which is the Prevention Needs Assessment, we learned that 51% of Wyoming junior high and senior high female students reported that they had considered suicide in the past year. All of our stats are from 2018. We always put our statistics 2 years behind to give families time to grieve and to heal. With that statistic, which this one hurts my heart so bad because I have a child at home this age, 19% of sixth graders. That's 11, 12, 13-year-olds. 19% of sixth graders reported that they had considered suicide within the past year. 83, quoting that incorrectly, 83% of our Wyoming junior high and high school male students have reported that they have considered suicide in the past year. 83. I mean, we're Wyoming, right? We're tough. We're cowboys. We're military families. We're strong. We don't have to show emotions. We don't talk about emotions. And that's the signal we're trying to end. So by talking about it, we can raise awareness and provide resources to our youth to help them through this. Two of the most important ones I want to highlight. First is our crisis text line, which is you just text WYO, W-Y-O, to 741-741, and you get a counselor to text back with you. So I don't know if you know anything, but teenagers are stuck like this. And I can't say much about that because I am also on my phone a lot. The next one that's really important for families is Safe to Tell Wyoming. We flood these schools with Safe to Tell material. We have bracelets and we have magnets and we have brochures because we want the students to know that there is a way that they can reach out. A lot of times as a student, you don't want to reach out because you're from a tough family. You're an important family. You can't talk to somebody about this. And what we're trying to communicate to the community is that you can. There we go. Oh, sorry about that. So as you just heard before, adults have feelings too. Those feelings don't end when we grow up. We assume that during the terrible twos, they're going to be emotional. And those preteens, their emotions are just all over the charts. 3 daughters back, they're all within a year of each other. That can get pretty risky. But adults have those feelings too. We just have learned how to manage with them. But when those feelings get to be so much and your bucket is overfilled, that's when it's time to let some things go and reach out for help. So with our adults here, the thing I want to highlight the most is that adults have trouble reaching out. We're supposed to be strong. We're supposed to be in control. I always thought when I was younger, and I remember a favorite aunt of mine was in her 30s, and I was like, wow, she's got her life together. That's when it happens, in your 30s. That's when you get your life together and you understand what's going on, right? No, that's not right. I don't think you ever really figure fully out. And that's okay too. It's important to reach out because these numbers that are going on in our world are just too high and not acceptable. Now, the thing I want to point out on this is that firearms, and I'm just going to highlight on that one just for a second. Oh, I am not good with a clicky. Our gun lock project. So here in Laramie County, we have 28 locations that we distribute gun locks to, and then there are some more other ones. They include our emergency departments, which we just checked in with them today, police stations, pawn shops, churches, anywhere that they sell firearms, public offices, they're available. They're even available at our office, right outside our door, whether we're there or not. If you know someone that needs one, please make sure that they're provided. Lock them up. Because we know that over 50% of suicides in the United States, over 50% are by a firearm. I mean, let's face it, it's Wyoming, right? Who doesn't have I have weapons in my own home. I have a gun in my own home, but the ammunition is locked up in one space, the gun is locked up in another, and this is what we're trying to teach our families. So adult resources, do you notice something similar here? Some of these resources are the same. They're not just for our youth. That crisis text line, you can text that if you're depressed, you're having a chemical addiction, you're feeling overwhelmed that day, you have a gambling problem, you're sitting there wondering and contemplating life. This number is available to you 24/7. Also, our National Suicide Prevention Lifeline is available, as well as the Trevor Project. There is help available, and it's there for you for free. So specifically for our military and first responders, we're military, right? We're tough. Well, we don't need help, do we? Or we just sit in silence and suffer. We need to break that silence. So if you are hurting, or you know somebody who is struggling and having these thoughts of suicide, of loneliness, of hurting yourself, please, please reach out. Just because you're in the military does not mean that you are a superhuman. You are not a superhero. You can do superhero things, but even soldiers need help. That's why we're not by ourselves, right? Everybody has their battle buddy. Everybody has that one person on their six, always willing and able to help. And there are resources to help you. They're at your six all the time. Now for our first responders, these ones are specifically for our officers because they, again, we can't see them as weak, right? So our military police officers, I know that's not the proper term, but we'll just say that for everybody else watching. Those resources are also available to you too. So please use them. We will make them available to you. They are also available on the Grace for Two Brothers website. If you are needing to get a hold of us because you want a training, because you want to know about the peer support groups, because you want to know where you can get help and you don't want to sit on a website and scroll through it, please give our office a call, leave a message. We will return those messages and make sure that you get connected with the people that can help. See, our purpose here at Grace for Two Brothers isn't just helping to educate, but it's helping to save those lives and it's helping to be a resource for our community. Our community doesn't stop where those military gates go up. See, we're called to help our neighbors, to love our neighbors, to be a good human. And to do that, we have to be able to notice when people are in need of help. So please reach out. You can also find our social media tags there, shameless tags. We're always looking for volunteers. And a lot of times our volunteers have come to say, hey, I'm just here to volunteer. But these resources are available for them too. And sometimes you just need somebody to reach out and understand that this is tough. I don't know how to ask for help. Let me help you. Let me direct you to the agency that can help you the most. So help is available. We really do need to shatter that silence. We need people to feel more confident to step out. And if it takes a magnet sitting on your refrigerator to remind you of the text line, or steps of grace to let you know how to help somebody, whether you need resources about firearms or you need help speaking with your children, we have those resources available and for you. We also have gun locks. They are free. You may have as many as you need. Just please make sure that they remain free within our community for those who need them. All of these resources are available in our office. You can contact us through our website. And if you want additional resources, you can peruse through our website to find out how do I get help with these items. All of these numbers are available there as well. So I just want to thank you all for inviting us here. We are so happy to be working with all of you.
Thank you, Ms. Candy. Grace for Two Brothers, Cheyenne, Wyoming. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Jeremy Bay, the Risk Reduction Coordinator for Magellan Federal, the Wyoming Army National Guard. The risks, the setbacks, and the safety plan. Welcome, Jeremy.
Thanks, everybody. So I've been given the dubious distinction of bringing this thing home. We've had 4 hours of speakers. We've had 8 hours of speakers. And I don't know how to top all that. So what I want to do is I want to talk about safe plans a little bit. I want to talk about calm training a little bit and lethal means. And I want to talk about what happens after somebody gets safe. And then I'll express some gratitude, because gratitude is part of appreciating yourself and appreciating others. So, common thread we talked about today was mindfulness, right? So mindfulness. Let's not worry too much about what's going on in the future. Let's not worry about tomorrow. Let's just worry about taking one step in front of the other right now, okay, to get us through. Conflict resolution, okay? If you're constantly at odds with somebody or at odds with yourself, how can you be okay? You know, how can you, Linda talked about your bucket being, or your brain being full of all this stuff, right? If you don't resolve that conflict and it keeps building up and building up and building up, you can't be resilient and you can't be okay. Okay, so take that to heart. Let's talk about lethal means for a second. I want to kind of fill the gaps in a little bit on this, all right? So as those of you who have heard me speak have heard me say before, and you will hear me say it again, depending on what source you cite, Wyoming is either first or second in suicide deaths per 100,000 people. What you probably haven't heard me say is that 70% of those deaths are due to firearms, all right? So what I'm going to urge you to do is, if you're a person that's struggling now, later, Reach out to someone you trust. Ask them to take the firearms out of your home until you're okay. All right? Those of you who are helping, if someone is not ready to step forward and ask for help, build that to a safe plan. Hey, I understand that you have guns in your house. Can we work out a plan together to remove those, to keep you safe? All right? When we talk about gun locks, Candy just talked about gun locks. Why do we have those? Why do those exist? They exist to give more time to think about the decision. They exist to give emergency responders more time to get to the person in need. They exist to give pause. Okay, when we talk about safe plans, I know people, many of the presenters know people, they hang a safe plan on their gun safe. Okay, just to give them pause, to say, what am I doing? What am I thinking about? All right? Also, when we talk about lethal means, people who attempt with lethal means, 90% of those are completed. Okay? You saw a lot of iceberg slides today. Tip that iceberg upside down when we're talking about lethal means suicide, okay? The top half of that is a lot bigger than the bottom half. 90% of those who choose to take their own life with a firearm are successful. 10% of those who choose to use pills or other methods are not successful. Okay, and let me rephrase that. Successful is not the word I want to use. Complete, all right? People who use firearms complete suicide. So keep that in mind, have the courage. And along those lines, what I want everybody to do right now, and it's gonna seem a little silly because you're probably sitting at home or in your office by yourself. I want you to turn to somebody that's sitting next to you, or just say it out into the universe. Are you thinking about suicide? And I want you to really say those words. Are you thinking about suicide? Okay, we talked about it a lot today. This is an uncomfortable topic. People don't like to talk about it. But if you can't talk about it, how can you help someone? How can you intervene? How many lives do you think, we talked about 48,000? 334 people that took their lives from suicide. How many of those lives could have been saved if someone would have stepped forward and said, are you thinking about suicide? Can I help you? Okay, so think about that. Say it out loud, practice it. All right? Understand your boundaries. That's a thing that we talked about a lot today too when we talk about helping people. Understand your own limits. Understand your limitations. Understand what you can and can't do. If you're a person who struggles with trauma, do you think it's a good idea for you to be a helper to someone that's experiencing trauma? No, understand your limits. We all get big hearts. People in this field have big hearts, and we want to save everybody. But a lot of times what happens is we step out and we hurt ourselves because we don't understand our limits. Okay? Now, I'm not telling you just to abandon the person that needs help, okay? But understand your limits, set the boundary, and do a warm handoff to somebody that can help, okay? That's somebody that's more equipped to help, all right? There are people that are professionals, PhDs, doctors, MDs, okay? They will do that. If they don't feel like they can help, they will hand off to somebody who can harm than good. We talked about PTSD, all right? Does anybody know what PTSD looks like? What causes PTSD? What if I told you that after 21, almost 22 years in the Navy, I'd never been in combat, but I had PTSD? Would you believe me? Okay, I do. What if I told you that every time a helicopter flies over me, I get a little antsy? Okay, I was part of a pretty bad helicopter crash on the back of a ship several years ago. There's a lot that goes on with that, okay? So, why do I tell you this? Just like we say depression doesn't have a face, neither does PTSD. And everybody kind of deals with it different. Everybody's got their own trauma and their own post-traumatic stress. Also, it doesn't have to be related to combat. There's a huge spectrum of trauma out there that people experience, trouble coping with it. So please recognize that and recognize it's important. don't get into the habit of dismissing people's trauma because it's not as important as you think it should be. Okay, it doesn't matter what we think as helpers. It matters what the person who's dealing with the trauma thinks. Okay, so keep that in mind. So let's talk real quick about a safety plan, all right? We've all been through ACE, a lot of us have been through ASSIST. So what does that look like? What are we trying to do? Are we trying to cure all their problems? Are we trying to make them better by waving our magic, I have a pen, so it's a magic pen. No, we're not, okay? We're trying to keep them safe for now, right? We're trying to keep them safe until 11:52, okay? We want to keep them safe for now, and that's what we're trying to do, all right? So we're going to engage them, right? That's why I want everybody to stand up and say, are you having thoughts of suicide? Okay, and I'm very specific when I say thoughts of suicide. Why? Because we talk about suicide being a wide range of thoughts and behaviors, right? If I say, are you thinking about killing yourself? Your answer may be no. But if I said, are you having thoughts of suicide? That's a different conversation. And we can get you at the top of that river that Lindsay Martin talked about, right? Instead of all the way down here where you're already in crisis, okay? So ask them, are you thinking about suicide? Then let's get in there and listen to what they're telling us. Listen to their story. You know, and this is stuff we talk about in ACE, ASSIST, QPR, okay? Listen, care. You have to care. You have to be empathetic in these situations. And again, please do not be dismissive of what they are telling you. A lot of people have heard this story. Brianna Brand has heard this story 20 times about the Muffin Man. I will tell it again. There was a gentleman who was thinking about taking his own life. And when they sat down to talk to him, they said, why do you, what is it that makes you want to live? And this gentleman made the best muffins in the town. And his link to life was, if I'm no longer here, who is going to make the muffins for my community that everybody loves so much? Not a big deal to a lot of us, right? Hey, the muffins, they're just muffins. Somebody else will get it, right? Right, but to that guy that's making them, those muffins are everything. And that's his link to life, so please do not be dismissive of that, okay? These little things are important, okay? And then, when we talk about ACE, we talk about escort, okay? We want to get them to somebody that can keep them safe. Those that are CIS trained, we want to build a safety plan, right? Hey, do you have pills in the house? Do you have lethal means in the house? Can I help you get rid of those? Is there somebody we can contact that you feel like talking to, all right? It's not always us. Sometimes it's Coach Bob from my high school swim team that I feel most comfortable talking to. So our responsibility is to link them with that person that they can have that conversation with. Don't leave them alone, okay? But maybe we're not the ones. Maybe we're not the ones they want to talk to. But don't leave them out there with nothing, okay? So what I'm saying is, let's get them safe and let's get them to the healthcare providers so they can help them, all right? We're not there to solve all of their crises. So to kind of wrap this up, I want to talk about gratitude and I want to talk about asking for help. We talked about you can't do it on your own because you're not going to be successful, all right? So the first thing I wanted to show gratitude for is that Leslie is helping my term Dr. Google to go viral, so I appreciate that. I hope it catches on. I hope everyone starts calling it Dr. Google. The other thing I want to talk about is everyone that participated today has a dog in the fight of making not only the Wyoming Army National Guard a suicide-safer community, but the community at large suicide-safer. And by locking arms and joining forces and taking a step forward together, we are far more powerful and effective than if we try to do it individually. Every organization has strengths. Every organization has values. But if we sit on an island and try to solve all the problems ourselves, we're not going to be successful. There's overlap that needs to happen. to catch all these folks. You know, you folks in the Army National Guard, you fall into a very unique category, is that you live in two worlds most of the time, most of you. I understand there's exceptions of AGRs and ADOS. Most of the time you fall into two worlds. You're kind of 1 foot in, 1 foot out. So where do you go to help? Or for help, right? That's why we're providing these resources, so you know where to go for help, all right? Give us a call. Don't be afraid to call a hotline. Don't be afraid to call any of these people you saw today, okay? Even if they can't help you, they will get you to somebody who can. They'll get you to the right people. You know, we talk about lines of effort and lines of funding and stuff, okay? That's true. But again, if you call one of us and you say you need help, we're not gonna be like, sorry, we're not paid to do that, okay? We're gonna make sure we get you to the right people to take care of you. So I wanna extend gratitude to everybody who stepped up today to participate in this thing. All the speakers, some of who are still here, some of who are left, hopefully they're watching. I also want to extend gratitude to Sergeant Jackie Marshall and her team. We could not have done, like literally, we could not have done this without you. I would have been standing here with a busted screen Galaxy Note trying to film these people and put them on Facebook. You guys have upped the production value and made this super great, so I really appreciate you guys. I appreciate everybody out there who's watching. You're trying to jump into the, you're jumping in the community to help us make this a suicide safer community. And we really appreciate it. This is our first time. We'll have some lessons learned and try to make it better next time. But again, thank you.
Thank you, Jeremy Bay, and thank you for attending the Wyoming Military Department Suicide Prevention Symposium, September 2020. This is a reminder that suicide is not an option. Be there to assist, be there to care, be there to escort, and be the shield and sword for the Wyoming National Guard. Thank you for your time, and thank you for your service.